So let's dig into Genesis 4. Verse 1 says, Now Adam knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. This is the specific first mention of sex in the Bible. Knew is a polite way of saying having sex, and we see that phrase a lot in the Bible. The terms for sex today, they are so coarse and violent. This was a respectful way to say this. In the Bible, sex is a way of getting to know someone in a committed relationship. It establishes a bond of unity, and it builds up a one flesh relationship. Now, it doesn't mean this is the first time that Adam and Eve had relations. They didn't have anything standing in their way, and they were certainly capable. But something special happens with this time. She has a son. Cain means, I've got him, or here he is. Remember back in chapter 3, God had promised a seed from Eve, a deliverer. Did she think this was it? She had no context. You know the song, Mary, Did You Know, where Mary is holding baby Jesus and wondering whether she knew everything that was going to happen to her? Well, Eve, did she know? Did she know she held a murderer? She didn't know what to expect. This is also the first time we see the word Yahweh for the Lord in by itself. Notice it's all capitalized in most versions. It is the personal, relational name of God. Verse 2 through 5 say, And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his voice fell. This is one of those sections where it's hard for us to understand. Why would he accept the one and reject the other? They look like they'd seem fine. Abel's name means breath, vapor, or vanity. Abel was born a shepherd, Cain a farmer. There's something called the Rabbinical Midrash. It was a document written about the 5th century AD, and it seeks to interpret the Torah. It tries to fill in the holes. And sometimes what they fill the holes in with is kind of funny, or seems a little off. So according to the Midrash, because it doesn't say, and Adam knew Eve here, they believe Cain and Abel were twins. It's possible, but it doesn't say that here. The word used for offering here is in the broadest sense. It covers any kind of gift they would bring. Anything they would give to God was an offering. So Cain brought some fruit, and he probably had it all nice and arranged, and it would look gorgeous. Abel brought a firstborn and some fat. Abel's offering was special. It was the best. The fat of an animal was considered a luxury. I had some friends that were missionaries in Russia, and they went to the fanciest restaurant in Moscow. And as an appetizer, they brought out this plate, and it had this white slice of something. Come to find out, it was fat. That was a luxury in the finest restaurant in Moscow. To God, fat is a luxury. Fat symbolizes abundance in life. I'm really abundant then because I got enough of that. We'll see over and over again. God asks for sacrifices from an animal, and He says you to include the fat portions. Don't, because that's giving the best. The fat was also seen as the seat of emotions and a symbol of prosperity and health. So I'm healthy and I'm prosperous. How about you? In Leviticus 17:6, the burning of fat in a sacrifice before God was called a sweet aroma. So Abel brought a special gift. But it was probably a bloody mess compared to Cain's beautiful offering. Abel's contained blood. God is more concerned about the faith in the heart than He is about how artistic something is. Some people would say that, well, God liked meat better than fruit. But we'll see in Leviticus that God said a grain offering was perfectly acceptable. In Hebrews 11:4, we see an explanation of why God accepted Abel's and not Cain's. By faith, Abel offered up a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Cain barely followed the rules, and Abel was worshiping God. Now it says that it implies they knew their sacrifices were accepted or not accepted. How? We don't know. It doesn't say. There must have been some kind of evidence. Maybe God sent a flame down and burned up Cain's sacrifice. Don't know. But it could have been by fire, because we see that happening in Judges 6:21, 1 Kings 18:38, 1 Chronicles 21:26, and 2 Chronicles 7:11. So when it says Cain was angry, he was super duper extraordinarily angry. He was very prideful. He couldn't bear that his brother's sacrifice was accepted and his wasn't. Outside of Eden, this is the first sin recorded, anger. And this is a sin that's a problem today. The word for anger here is really intense. Obviously, angry enough to kill. Verse 6 and 7 say, the Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. God is dealing with Cain in a loving confrontation. He's giving us an example of how we are to approach others. We're not to sweep it under the rug, but we're to talk to them in love. God made it clear to Cain that he would be accepted if he did well. Cain had a choice. God gives us choices. We are responsible for what we choose. This is another time that God knew the answers to questions, but he wanted Cain to verbalize it. And he wants Cain to resist the pull to violence. This is the pull of sin. The Israelites had 10 words for sin. This word for sin means missing the mark, as if you are shooting an arrow and you miss the mark. So we can resist sin and find blessing, or give into it and be devoured. We can avoid sin by allowing God to rule over us. Without God, we're slaves to sin. Verse 8 says, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. The sense here is that Cain planned to catch Abel by surprise, having a nice conversation with him. It was premeditated murder. He was thinking about how to do that. He ignored God's way of escape. This is the first human to die. And the first human to die is by violence. But Cain had seen how animals were killed. So he probably killed Abel in the same way. Sin was loose. Now think about Eve, what she must be going through. Poor Eve. And from that point, sin could not be contained. It was out running around. Verse 9 says, Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel, your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? So another time God is asking a question he knows the answer to. Any possibility he doesn't know the answer to? But he wants to give Cain the opportunity to fess up and repent. What good does it do to lie to God? God knows the answer. It's insanity to think God didn't know where Abel was, or that he could actually hide from God. Then again, just like Dad. This reply is famous. Am I my brother's keeper? The answer is yes. You are your brother's keeper, and you murdered him for a really stupid reason. Abel hadn't done anything to Cain. It was pure jealousy. Cain's answer showed his heart. Verses 10 through 12 say, And the Lord said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened his mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. God curses. So the word for blood here is plural, and it means Abel and his possible descendants, and it is intense. The blood of Abel cried for judgment. The blood of Jesus also speaks, but it's of better things. His cries out for grace and for sin having been judged. So the curse of Adam has been multiplied. This is the first direct curse on a man. If bringing food was hard for Adam, it's going to be impossible for Cain. And remember, Cain is a farmer. If Adam was driven from the earth, driven from Eden, Cain is driven where there's no resting place. Cain, the farmer, was banished into the desert, someplace not farmable. Is this why Cain's line, we will see they develop an urban life rather than a rural life? They can't farm. Verses 13 through 15 say, Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me away today from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. So Cain is given a life as a fugitive and a wanderer. It's the opposite of rest. Cain, you notice any guilt he's showing about killing his brother? He doesn't admit anything. He's worried about himself. It's the same today. We feel bad when we're caught. But instead of turning to God, we pity ourselves. We try to place the blame on other things. And we say, what about me? So Cain is feared for his own life. So the question comes up, who is he afraid of? Who's around to be afraid of? The rabbis say he was afraid of the animals. Others say he was afraid of his own relatives. We don't see it yet, but there will be more sons and daughters. And they had what was called a blood vengeance. If you killed a relative, another relative was to come and exact vengeance. That relative is called a Goel, and we will run into them. So as significant as Cain's judgment from God was, God didn't want Cain killed by other people. This is possible because there really wasn't much of a population on earth, and you can't really spare too many. They've already lost one. Don't know, doesn't explain. So God put some kind of identifying mark on Cain that served as a protection. No one really knows what that mark was. Although the Midrash says that God put an animal horn in the middle of Cain's head. Again, we don't see that in Scripture. Verse 16 and 17. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, where he built a city. He called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So Cain leaves. We don't see anything about him saying bye to mom and dad. Don't know if that happened. Don't know if it didn't. Nod means wandering, or the land of wanderers. So Cain wanders to the land of wanderers. So, who did Cain marry? The Bible doesn't tell us. Most conservative scholars say he married one of his sisters. By the time of Leviticus, marrying a sister is against the law. But this is so long before the law of Moses, and there would have been no one else to marry. Genesis 5:43 will say that Adam had other sons and daughters. So Cain builds the first city. It's the beginning of industry and urbanization. But wasn't he told he'd be a wanderer? Isn't he disobeying God again? From the beginning, man has been self-centered, not God-centered. So he builds this city, and he names it after his son. The fall of man continues. Enoch may mean beginner or initiator. Don't know. Okay, so now we're going to get our first genealogy. And let me remind you what one of my teachers said, just say the names really fast and everyone thinks you know what you're talking about. I really don't. So forgive me if you know Hebrew and I'm saying things all wacky, but I'm saying them. Verse 18 to 22 says, To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehushel, and Mehushel fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Lamech, and Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Notice we don't get the length of anyone's life here. You will see a difference when we get to Adam's lineage through his other children. Notice there's a lot of these names have E-L in them. El. El means God. I read there is no L in it. It means it's either means a city or a fleet-footed or wild ass. Mehujael, El, God, giver of life. El makes, and it means El makes alive. Methuselah is a man of El, a man of God, a strong youth. So things are advancing quickly. A city's founded, they're building homes, we've got music and arts going, metalworking. The idea that man advanced quickly goes against most modern theories. But archaeology can only evaluate on the basis of what they find and what has been preserved. So it's not a perfect science. It can't fill in all the holes unless it finds something that fills in another hole. Lamech. Lamech means conquer. Lamech lived at the same time that Enoch on the side of Seth lived. Lamech is prideful, arrogant, and Enoch is humble. We've got two family lines going here. One is a line to disobedience through Cain. The other one is a line to Christ through Seth. Notice the line of disobedience. So it's the first one to have two wives. That was not God's plan, but man is insistent. Lamech is the first bigamist in history. Goes against God's plan of one man and one woman. So we get the names of Lamech's wives and daughters to show where his heart was. Adah means pleasure, ornament, or beauty. Zillah means shade, probably referring to luxurious hair. Naamah, his daughter, means loveliness. According to the Midrash, one of the wives was to bear children, and the other one was for pleasure. You can tell by the names that Lamech's culture was committed to physical beauty. Then we have more descendants. We have Jabal, which means wanderer, Jubal, which may mean sound, Tubal-Cain, he's the first to make weapons, and Naamah means pleasant or beautiful. The Midrash says that Naamah married Noah, but again, it's a Midrash. They like to fill in holes in their own way. So verse 23 and 24 are written in poetry. It says, Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. So Lamech's focus is on his beautiful wives and his own perceived strength. There's a rabbinical legend that Both wives end up leaving him because he killed Tubal-Cain while they were out hunting. And then he boasted about murder. And he believed, he was so prideful that he thought he could get a greater retribution than Cain. Cain had sevenfold, Lamech 77. It doesn't mean he got it. He thinks he got it. It just shows how quickly man became depraved. Things just kept getting worse and worse. This is humanism. It's a man-centered perspective, not a God-centered. Some say that he was holding up Tubal-Cain's weapons while he was boasting about it. For all his boasting, neither he nor his descendants are ever heard of again in the Bible. He came to nothing. Verses 25 through 26 say, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also was born a son born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So Adam and Eve, we don't see anything that says how many children they had specifically. But we get the important children. Seth are the ones that make a difference historically. Seth, in Eve's mind, he replaced Abel, the one to whom a promise of a deliverer came in her mind. And so, but the promise that the deliverer would come through Seth. Seth means compensation. God is rebuilding his family. This is the beginning of the messianic line. This is from whom Jesus would come. So even though things are starting to become wicked, the worship of God was not unknown. When it talks about, and people began to call upon the name of the Lord, it implies a regular public worship. This is the first revival. It's the first sign of a spiritual resurgence after a decline. It seems that God's enemies are publicly united, and this verse tells us that now the people of God are publicly uniting. They're joining in public worship. Where Genesis describes two families, it first described the less important one. Let's get this out of the way and we're going to forget about him. So now it goes to Seth's line, and the line that will go on forever as God's people. That's the end of Genesis 4. Next time we'll look at Genesis 5.